Hey, yo, what it do, what it do? It's your boy Q, and we got ourselves an action-packed week of esports, man. We got VCT Champions starting up with group play. We got the Esports World Cup hosting their Apex portion of competitions this weekend. We got the final week of group play for the Shift Summer League, and oh, let's not forget, we've also got VCT Challengers wrapping up in North America, getting ready to send 2 teams to Ascension. We also, this past weekend, we got to watch the HCS LAN down in Atlanta. Was a really good time as well, man. What a time to be alive when it comes to being an esports fan. And, you know, I think I want to knock out these things kind of in order today, as far as kind of talking about the couple titles that we generally talk about over here with the OnCue Esports podcast. And I guess talk about them in the order that they finish, I guess, because yeah, technically we've got the NA Challenger starting today. We'll actually be doing a watch party later today on Monday for the upper bracket finals, but that actually runs through Wednesday night, and I do want to talk about that a little bit with Champions here in just a moment. So you know what, I guess let's go ahead and get started off with the Shift Summer League. It's the final week of league play, final week of regular season action, so last chance for teams to kind of work for their seeding as well as for qualifying or not qualifying. And we'll be doing watch parties for the 2 regions as well tomorrow, Tuesday and Wednesday. EU starting at 1 p.m. Eastern time. We've also got NA starting at 7 p.m. Eastern time. We'll be doing our challengers at 4 p.m. throughout the week and kind of fitting in games around that here as well. And I figured, you know what? Since of our videos that we did for week number 1, the NA one did get a little bit better reception, we'll start there. I mean, plus, I mean, NA on top, right? We're the champions, baby. And I mean, if you do want to tune in just for the EU portion review of the Shift Summer League, I'll go ahead and always have those things, of course, marked down below if you guys are listening to this thing over here on YouTube. I'm also going to have it chatted out over in the description of our podcast platforms as well. But not only that, I think NA is going to be a little bit easier to go through here as well, because if we're being real, when we look at NA as far as the bracket here on your screen, it kind of tells the story, right? We're more than likely this week mostly just going to be playing for seeding. Yeah, you have OG just outside of that top 6, sitting at 5 and 7. But I mean, their remaining schedule is pretty tough, right? I mean, Fun, Pirates on a Boat, Incorrect, they're all sitting down there 8th through 10th, unless they miraculously turn things around and basically everything falls in line for the teams that they need to be able to pass up. They're probably all out, right? But I mean, for OG, even when you look at their remaining schedule, right? I mean, they got Shopify Rebellion, they've got RMC, they've got SSG, they've got G2, they've got Gen G. Basically the only easy matchup, and I put easy in quotes, and of course this is 10 of the best teams when it comes to North American Rocket League. The easiest one would be their last matchup, which is Fun, so it's not like you can really build up any momentum before or after that matchup as well, right? So I mean, when you look at for them, in the 6 games that they do have left, they went 1-5 during the first iteration, only beating Fun. Again, Fun being that last team that they are going to play in in day number 6 on Wednesday. So it's going to be rough for them if they're going to qualify. It doesn't seem like OG is in a position right now, unless they completely turn around the brand of ball that they're playing. I just quite frankly don't see it happening. But when we talk about our more probable teams, right? The teams that are currently, you know, sitting in that 1 through 6 spot, let's go ahead and start with Dignitas, man. I mean, oh, how the mighty have fallen. When we think back to the last video that we did after week number 1, they were sitting at 4-2, sitting in 2nd place. Now sitting down there at 6-6 after going 2-4 last week. They should be able to secure this, secure some wins this week. You've got some wins. You're talking about, you know, Poab and Fun, and they did technically also beat G2 the last time that they did square off against them. But, you know, can lightning strike twice? That's the sort of deal that you have to ask yourself when you're going against a team like G2 in league play like this. But you could also kind of make the same sort of arguments for the teams that you're playing that you did lose to last time around if you're Dignitas as well. So it feels like Dignitas controls their destiny. But at 6-6, with everyone else kind of sitting up at that 8-4 spot, it does feel like that if Dignitas is going to advance, more than likely they're just only going to be advancing in that number 6 spot, unless they like really turn things around in a team like Shopify and Space Station really fall off. And look, I know I only called out 2 of the 4 teams that are 8-4. I just don't see G2 and Gen G falling off that hard. Gen G already had their rough week. I would argue in G2 sense they haven't really had that standout week here yet, so that might even be this coming week for week number 3 of that Shift Summer League play. But yeah, we got 4 teams, man, locked up at that 8-4. You know, we're talking Gen G, SSG, G2, Shopify. And I guess we'll start with the top of the 4 teams. So we'll start technically that number 2 spot. Gen G, they went 5-1 last week with their only loss being to Dignitas. And in that game against Dignitas, I mean, all the games that they lost were only 1-goal games. Some would argue that it was one of the closest games that we had, I would say probably in that last block, especially for it being a 3-1, right? Definitely a lot closer than you expect for an only a 4-game series. They got a tough road. They don't necessarily have the easiest road. I feel like saying they got a tough road, though, is kind of underselling what everyone's. I mean, everyone really has a tough road of these last top 5 teams that have what they've got left, right? But they got games against G2, Fun, RMC, Shopify, OG, and Incorrect. They'll need to make sure they capitalize on the games that they are supposed to win, though, right? If they're going to want to get themselves like a really good spot for the playoffs. G2, of course, currently sitting in that 8-4 spot. They're up 3 spots technically, but that was because they kind of stumbled in day number 3, heading into day number 4. I mean, they've got a tough-ish remaining schedule, right? I mean, G2 does have teams like Gen G to start things off. I feel like that should be a really, really good game. Last time those 2 squared off against one another was actually on Tuesday last week. It was in the second round of Tuesday's game instead of the first round. Both of these teams are going to be able to come into that. There's no one coming off of any momentum. No one, haven't had played easier competition than the other. It's the first game of the day for those two teams. And I'm definitely going to want to make sure that I'm tuning in for that on Tuesday. But even after that, I mean, they've got SSG. Yeah, you've got POAB to round things out on day 5. But I would even say POAB isn't necessarily a walkover either. Same thing you could say for OG, although OG is on the outside looking in when it comes to the playoffs. And then you still have RMC as well as Dignitas again one more time to round out day number 6. So G2 also obviously doesn't have the easiest of roads. It feels like G2 probably secure. Again, I feel like all of our top 6 are secure where they're at. The question for G2 is how strong can they finish and what kind of spot can they get themselves for playoffs. When we think about the playoff format, right? Only 6 teams make it. And you don't want to get locked into that number 5 or 6 spot because you lose that opportunity to have that double elimination, right? You've already starting on your last limb. So for G2, you got to make sure you finish strong this week. You have some tough opposition. I feel like for them, their week starts with how good they look in the Gen G game. Even if they lose against Gen G, if it's another 5-game banger where it's back and forth, then you're not too concerned. But if you come out and you kind of get the brakes beat off you in that first game of the week, that kind of sets a bad tone for the rest of the week. So I feel like for G2, that Gen G game is going to be the one that's most important. SSG currently sitting in that number 4 spot. Plus 7-game differential. They've been looking really good, honestly, all Shift Summer League. Doesn't really feel like they've had a bad week by any stretch of the means, any of the 4 days. I mean, technically 4th where they're sitting right now, it is the lowest that they have been. Again, not an easy road when you talk about as far as for them. For SSG, you've got Dignitas, G2, and OG on day number 1, so on Tuesday. But then on Wednesday, things lighten up a little bit. You've got Incorrect, you've got Shopify, and then you've got POAB. So especially if for SSG, you can go 2-1 on Tuesday, you figure you're setting yourself a good tone for Wednesday, rounding things up, hopefully aiming for that top 4. Because again, you're trying to avoid being in that bottom spot as far as that 2nd through 4th, where these 4 teams who are tied at 8-4 currently sit. And of course, that is going to give us Shopify as our last remaining team left. They might have the most favorable run left, though, which is quite interesting with them being the team down in that 5 spot. But it's only because of how things line up, if you ask me, because they do have kind of like a 50-50 sort of schedule, but they can build some momentum on Tuesday, right? I mean, on Tuesday, you've got OG, then you've got POAB, then you've got Incorrect. 3 teams that you can realistically beat. Then you're only looking at, hey, let's go into Wednesday. We only need to win 1 series. And on Wednesday, yeah, it's a tough road. Gen G, SSG, RMC. Arguably the 3 best teams that aren't called, or I shouldn't say arguably the 3 best teams that aren't called G2. Definitely the 3 best teams in NA right now that aren't called G2. So you're definitely getting best of both worlds when it comes to where they sit right now in that top 10 for just the Shift Summer League, right? But it does feel like for Shopify, if you build up that momentum on Tuesday, you might stand a chance on Wednesday. But for Shopify, it really all lies on that Tuesday. If you walk out of Tuesday at even at a 2-1, it feels like you got to walk away on Tuesday with a 3-0. Because at 2-1, you're already kind of questionable. If you're Shopify, you walk out with a 1-2, you're probably finishing in that 5th or 6th seed. Maybe even being the 1 team that does fall out of that playoff contention. It does feel like, though, for me, when we talk about NA, the top 6 is probably going to be the top 6 that makes playoffs. RMC, Gen G, G2, SSG, Shopify, and Dignitas, right? It's just going to be more about what order they finish in for the playoffs itself. I don't know. If you guys think that OG has a really good chance, let me know down in those comments below, all right? It's not that I'm discrediting him. Again, it's just kind of the way that the things break down. I just don't know if OG has what it takes, especially because the 1 team that they are going to have to worry about falling off is Dignitas. And honestly, I think Dignitas have been looking really, really good since that Zenil pickup. So you guys let me know down in those comments below. Let's go ahead and move on over to EU. Keep things rolling, baby. Over in EU, I don't want to say less competitive because I don't think that's a fair statement. It's just the competition in EU is in a different spot. Whereas in NA, the competition is kind of in that 2 through 5 region to figure out where they're going to seed. I mean, you've got Oxygen at 11-1 very firmly in that top spot. Remember, Oxygen technically started the Shift Summer League with a loss. So they've won 11 straight. They're looking phenomenal. I would even argue that 100% at 9-3. Probably solidified in the playoffs. I would even stay solidified into that top 4. And even with Jobless at 8-4 as well. And the big reason for that being is because there's a little bit of a fall off between them and even where Endpoint is at, right? Where Endpoint is sitting at, what, 6-6? You figure even for Jobless, they're going to have to go 2-4. And then Endpoint have, a better than average kind of turnout. You feel like those top 3 are probably pretty well solidified in the playoffs as well as into that top 4 spot. The big thing really, though, for Endpoint, even if they go 50%, you figure even that should be good enough for playoffs. But they're going to want to make sure they're securing that upper half of the bracket to make sure they do still have that second chance, right? But Endpoint, I mean, they have a decent schedule. You start with Resolve, who technically you lost to, but you should be able to beat. You should be able to make the adjustments off of that, right? 100% will be a tough matchup on Tuesday. And then from there, you'll play Fake GA, who I do believe they actually beat last time around. And then even their following day, they got Luna Galaxy. They've got Jobless. I mean, it feels like you should at least be able to go 50%, I think, for Endless. So that should be enough also to secure themselves a top 4, I do believe. Well, maybe not, because if a Spartaco or Luna Galaxy is able to get up to like a 500 record, their game differential will probably be better than what Endpoints is sitting at. Endpoint is going to have to be concerned about that game differential. Only time will tell. Again, though, I do really feel like the top 4 are pretty well secured into playoffs. I would say the top 3 are secured into the upper bracket. Endpoint, they do kind of control their destiny. As far as when we look at, here for the last 2 spots, I mean, Spartaco had a huge bounce back last week. When we look at where they were sitting after week number 1, they were sitting down at 1-5. Now, Spartaco sits at 5-7. They're in that 5th spot. They'll have a tough start on Tuesday because they do have to play against Spartaco first. But then they can, round out the rest of the day with some momentum if you are Spartaco. You've got Fake GA, you've got Sadad. It feels like those are 2 teams that you should be able to walk away with dubs with. walk into that final day of league play. You start Wednesday as well with JJ Rocks, but you do unfortunately finish things off in the Shift Summer League with games against 100% and Oxygen. So you got to get things going early. It feels like it feels like Tuesday is what's going to make or break Spartaco if they are going to make the playoffs. It's because they have a fantastic Tuesday. If they don't perform on Tuesday, I just don't see a way they bounce back on Wednesday and are going to be able to still make it into the playoffs. So for them, it's all about early on in the week. For Luna Galaxy, on the other hand, they're kind of like the opposite end of that story, right? For Luna Galaxy, they were sitting at 4-2 after the first week, currently down at 5-7 after going 1-5 last week after the roster swap. They did split their series with 100%, so I think that has me feeling a little bit better going into the last 6 series, all being repeats. A lot of them of some series that they lost previously during the Shift Summer League, right? And they got a decent draw this week as well. I mean, yeah, you start off with Oxygen. That's tough. But then you got Sadad. Then you've got JJ Rocks. Then you've got Endpoint Even, who is sitting at that 50%. I feel like the Endpoint game is really going to be the point where it lets you know if they are going to be able to turn things around, right? Because if they take the Endpoint series, where was I just at? The Endpoint series, you're able to carry that into Resolve and Fake GA as well. I think the start of Wednesday is going to be huge. We talk about for Luna Galaxy. Now, of course, that does take care of our bottom 2 teams currently. When it comes to those 6 that would be in the lower bracket, there are still 2 other teams that are tied with them. Fake GA and Sadad both sitting at that 5-7. Grid Serve Resolve also, I mean, within striking distance, kind of at 4-8. If you ask me, I think the way that they've looked, I just don't see it happening. I feel like if there's going to be a team that moves up into the top 6 in EU right now in the final week, it would be Fake GA or Sadad. And it's interesting, right? Because they play each other this week. Last time they played, I mean, Fake GA did win. They play each other in the second to last series on Wednesday. I don't know, though. I feel like for them, for Sadad, it's really about Tuesday. You got to be able to take home the dub against Luna Galaxy. You do. You also should be able to carry that over into JJ Rocks, right? Then you're able to take down Endpoint. You should be feeling plenty good when you get to Resolve, which would be like the last, like, we need this win for you to be able to make the playoffs. It's going to be tough for Sadad. I don't know if I see it happening. Again, I think between Fake GA and Sadad, I do believe Sadad is the team that would be able to move up into that top 6. But in a similar fashion to the way that we see in NA right now, I do think that we're going to see some iteration of this top 6 here for the playoffs. Luna Galaxy, Spartaco, Endpoint, Jobless, 100%, and Oxygen. Oxygen, I think, locks down the top spot. I even think the way that 100% has been looking, they also lock down spot number 2. Behind that, it's wide open. I mean, even Jobless right now, sitting at 8-4, they could come out and go like 1-5, and I wouldn't be surprised, and somehow end up in the 5 spot. I don't think that they do, but like that's just what Jobless tends to do, right? Like, they like to make things hard on themselves. I don't see a world there though where both Fake GA and Sadad make it up into the top 6. So I think it's either one or the other. But I mean, Shift Summer League looks like it's going to be a bang. Y'all already know we're going to be tuning into as much of it as we can over here on the channel, both Tuesday and Wednesday. As I said before, Tuesday, we got, or not Tuesday and Wednesday, for EU, it starts at 1 p.m. Eastern time. For NA, 7 p.m. Eastern time. We'll also be watching a little bit of NA Challengers in between that as well. And speaking of Challengers here, we do have the end of North American Challenger Circuit for VCT going on. We're going to be watching a little bit of it here today. Actually, the winner's bracket final, which is going to be Moist and Shopify versus M80, kicks off. We're down to our final 4, man. I haven't really gotten to watch too much live this year just because your boy's been a busy bee, but I have been keeping up with things. And in fact, in like a fashion of more so watching some VODs, mostly just highlights, and of course keeping an eye on the stats as well over the season. It's interesting, right? Moist has had this up and down season, whereas M80, kind of a different story. M80 has been one of these teams that's consistently been looked at as they should be one of the teams, you know, being able to play for one of those 2 ascension spots. Some might even argue the favorite to take that top ascension spot, especially when you have players, you know, like a BCJ, a Koala Noob who are on your team. I don't know, man. I feel like M80 should be able to earn one of the 2 spots. Of course, if you win this upper bracket final, the game that we will be watching today. So if you're listening to the podcast version of this, you will not be able to tune into it live. I don't think the podcast version of it will be able to drop until like very early Tuesday morning. But we are going to be tuning into it Monday night. So if you're watching this thing over on YouTube and it's not past Monday night, we're going to be watching the upper bracket final, 4 p.m. Eastern time, Moist versus M80. Of course, this matchup did just recently play out here, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it was actually literally just a couple of weeks ago. M80 was able to walk away in a close one, though. Both of the 2 maps going the distance. I do imagine Moist should be able to keep up with M80 here still. I just feel like M80's, I feel like it's their story. They're supposed to go to Ascension. I would even argue that M80 is supposed to ascend this year. But only time will tell. We've also seen Oxygen and TSM in the past. It was earlier on during the season. Oxygen was, I mean, really one of the best teams during group play. I'm honestly kind of surprised they are already down here in the lower bracket. Part of it was just the fact that they had to cross M80 relatively early. I think Oxygen beats TSM. I think Oxygen also beats Moist over Moist and Shopify. And we do get to get that run back of M80 versus Oxygen. Y'all know I love the story of being able to see, you know, a team who once earlier in a playoffs was sent down to a lower bracket, be able to get that redemption when they do face off against one another later on in the playoffs. I just don't think it happens here. Again, I think M80 is meant to ascend from Americas this year. I think M80 is going to be the team that does walk out on top. Like I said, we're going to be watching as much challengers as possible over the course of the week. It does kind of sit nuzzled in between NA and EU. So it's going to be a little tougher to do. What we'll probably end up doing is just we'll watch it we'll jump over as soon as EU is done for Shift Summer League, and then as soon as the winners bracket portion of games are done, we will switch over to NA. Yeah, I think more than likely that's going to be what we do. We'll stick on board with VCT though, because not only do we have NA Challengers, but in case y'all missed it, we did do our Pick Ems for VCT Champions. Believe it or not, we've already got VCT Champions starting up. I know we like literally just went over playoffs for VCT not too long ago. Of course, we recently had the VCT playoffs video that went up. If you didn't get to catch the reviews video, that one will be linked up above here as well. Not only that though, but we also, a couple of days ago, did our Pick Ems. So make sure you check that one out as well. I'm not going to give away the farm as far as what my Pick Ems are. Make sure y'all are checking out that video over on YouTube if you haven't already done so. But I do kind of want to talk a little bit about what I'm excited for when it comes to VCT Champions, man. One, games start very early in the morning, so we'll be able to watch them kind of at the top of the day. I think the 16 teams that we got are going to lead to some phenomenal Valorant action. I think in groups like Group C and Group A, I do think that your top 2 favorited teams that you're looking at there are probably going to be most likely the 2 that you see advance when you look at Fnatic, DRX, when you look at Leviathan and Team Vitality. But Group B and D are wide open, and I'm really excited to see how those 2 groups specifically break down. Of course, especially in Group B, one, you've got Gen G, who have kind of built this roster out of nowhere this year, right? Like, you picked up a couple of players who didn't have very much experience at all, including Karen. Why did I say Karen? Including Karen, who has been phenomenal this year. Probably, I mean, arguably one of the best players in the world, if not the best player. I think the best player probably comes from Americas personally, but definitely one of the ones up there, especially an emerging talent. They've put this roster together, and as much as other teams this year have shown how strenuous that the schedule can be for VCT. Coming back from my Masters, how often do we see teams have fall-offs? Yeah, Gen G might see a little bit, but then they're still being able to compete. They looked good at the beginning of the season, right? They won the second major. The second Masters. I was thinking major for RLCS. And then I think are one of the favorite teams for champions as well. So Gen G has a chance to really be able to solidify their legacy. Of course, in Group B as well, you've got Team Heretics. Benji Fish, literally 5 years ago, had just gotten done competing in the Fortnite World Cup, now competing in the World Championship for Valorant. Would be a phenomenal story. You all know me, man. I just love being able to see like good stories unfolding, being able to tell them over here on the channel as well. Sentinels would be another good story. FPX finally being able to put on for China. I mean, Group B is just stacked with stories. Even Group C, as much as I say that like Leviathan and Team Vitality are probably shoe-ins for those two spots, Primi might just be that different. You know, I know that playing against Team Secret might be a little bit different than playing against a Leviathan or a Team Vitality when it comes to picking up a player who is mostly just, you know, kind of a ranked grinder. Could turn some heads, though. It could be just the difference maker in kind of throwing off the pace of play from what you're expecting to see from competitive Valorant, where they could use that to their edge. Not so much in their opening series against Leviathan, and I really don't believe that they can take down Team Vitality either, but maybe, just maybe they catch Team Vitality off guard. Imagine if Talent Esports, a team that literally finds this talent from out of nowhere, brings them in. Their first game in VCT is to lock in their spot for champions, and then somehow, some way, after that, find a way to get into the playoff bracket. What a story that would be for Talon. But Group D, well, that's the group of death right there. And you got to feel bad for Foot Esports, because I felt like Foot was in this place this year where they were starting to emerge out of the EMEA region. We were fighting with the storyline from Team Heretics. All of a sudden, Fnatic starting to return to true form as well. And now you're in Group D, fighting for your life. Playing against EDG, I would probably say, in my opinion, the only hope for China to be able to compete at the highest of stages here at VCT Champions, just because FPX is in a tough group as well. And I just do believe in EDG a little bit more than I trust FPX. I would love to see a 4-region Final Four the way we just recently saw here in the RLCS. I would love to see that for VCT. But that would require either G2 or PaperX not being able to advance through the playoff bracket, which would in itself still be a pretty cool story. I mean, a little heartbreaking for G2, but they are an Ascension team. Like, they've already kind of broken the expectations for their team for the year, right? Like, G2 is the reason that they changed the Ascension rules, that you had to qualify to this point to be able to maintain your spot, because they proved that you can, right? And for G2 and PaperX, that's your first game of champions. G2, PaperX. Oh, man. Oh, man. Oh, man. VCT Champions promises to be an absolute banger. Y'all, you got to think about some of the storylines that are waiting to be told. Now, of course, I'm not going to give away the farm on this either, because we are going to be doing a top 5 stories to keep an eye on for at Seoul. That's going to be a video dropping here in the next couple of days. I want you to keep in mind a few things. In Group C, you've got Leviathan. You've got Aspas, who's trying to cement their legacy as arguably the best player in the world right now. Someone who's been at the top of the game while we've seen players like Yays who have come and gone. While we've seen artists be able to change regions and then go back and seemingly fall off in EMEA. Or a Demon 1 be able to come into NA, take the region by storm last year. Sorry. Come into Americas last year, take the region by storm, and now all of a sudden is sitting on a bench. But Aspas has changed teams. There's been these concerns looming around the personality of Aspas as they cause drama within rosters, been able to keep their nose down on the grindstone. They have a chance here at VCT Seoul to prove that they are the best Valorant player in the world. Phenomenal. Banger. G2 in Group D. to go from Ascension to Champions with pretty much the core. Banger. For Fnatic, a team that looked like they had fallen off at the beginning of the season in EMEA, to be able to weather the storm after being held complacent, instead of going through this roster blow up, instead getting together with the boys and being like, you know what, we got to get to that same old beast that we were last year and turning things around. Similarly, in Group A, you can say the same thing for DRX. Man, every group has some phenomenal stories that we're just waiting to hope to see to unfold in Seoul. I don't know about you guys, but I am excited for it. Unfortunately, we don't have permission to do watch parties for Seoul. Doesn't mean I won't be watching some of it in the Discord. Of course, our Discord down in the description below. We'll also be doing some VOD reviews as well. Maybe doing those before we go live for the Esports World Cup later on in the week. And of course, we do have the Esports World Cup popping up later this week. Excited. By the way, flashbang warning. My bad for our visual folks for the podcast over here on YouTube. My bad, folks. But we got the Esports World Cup popping up this week. We're going to be kicking things off. I think it's Thursday. Is that right? Getting started off on the 1st. So yeah, getting started on Thursday. Thursday. Getting started off at 11:15 Eastern time. Format kind of interesting. I can't remember if we talked about the format last year or last week or not. But you do have the 2 groups. I did, of course, also do my tier list for EWC last week. So if you guys haven't been able to check that one out, check that on out. I guess it's more right up on yonder up there. But the way that the group stages are going to work out, we have our 2 groups, Group A, Group B, 20 groups apiece. Have they changed Passion UA on here? They did change out Passion for EXO since Passion cannot attend. EXO Clan takes their spot. So you have your 2 groups. They are going to play on Thursday and Friday in a 10-game series, which 10 games is kind of wild. But from that, the top 9 teams from each lobby advances to the grand final. The scary part about this is you could have made your trip from all sorts of places from around the world, OCE to West Coast, I guess, if NA would probably be a pretty big trip to the Middle East as well. Could have made the trip to Riyadh, and if you finish in 20th place in group stage, you're done. You get 10 games, and that's it. You get 1 series, and that is all. Meanwhile, those teams placed 10th through 19th, so 10 teams from Group A and Group B, they will meet in the last chance lobby. 2 of those teams advance. The other 18 teams do go home. One thing we've been talking about a little bit over on the channel during our watch parties as of lately, one thing that I'm excited about, you will see that people get paid out all the way down to 40th. That's not something that happens very often. And we still have 600,000 going to our first place team, 375 going to our second place team. Below that, some of those prizes change up a little bit compared to ALGS just to make sure everyone else gets paid. But still a lot of money getting thrown around. If you guys haven't got a chance to check out the tier list to see as far as my thoughts of who wins, who qualifies, who gets sent home early, definitely make sure y'all are peeping that out before Thursday. Leaving those comments below, of course, on that video. Let me know where I swing, where I miss, where I hit. Remember, man, every time you guys watch these videos over here, every like, every comment, those things really help out YouTube. Let them know they should be putting the content in front of more people. That way we can continue to help grow this channel. We're chasing down that first 500 subscribers, trying to get there, because once we hit that 500, we're halfway to the first 1,000, which of course is the first real big milestone for YouTube. So I appreciate each and every one of y'all that have been supporting along the way. I know we're getting pretty close to that 30-minute marker, y'all, that I try and keep these podcasts tuned down to. I want to try and make it something that you guys can enjoy during your lunch. But a couple things I do want to point out. We're not going to have a POI draft. We could be seeing those contests here again. And then there's a 60-point match point format. So the format, quite a bit different when it comes to EWC. I'm going to be really intrigued if that changes up any of the results at all, especially on match point format. Sometimes we see where teams win before that 50-point threshold and then struggle to get a dub after that. So if now the threshold is 60, does that make it where it's even harder for teams to get to that mark and then be able to get that win that's required in order to walk home as champions? Should be a lot of fun to be able to tune into. Some of the stuff on the weekend, I might be starting a little bit late or maybe even ending just a little bit early. It is the little man's birthday weekend, so I don't apologize for that. You know what I mean? Being a dad does come first here. But the last thing I did want to talk about, man, this past weekend, I got to sit down and we got to watch the HCS event down in Atlanta. First time I've been able to check out a Halo event in quite some time. Honestly, was an absolute blast here. Y'all don't watch Halo. Y'all need to get back into it. I know I'm going to be watching the Space Station event in September, as long as we aren't in the hospital by that time, waiting for number 2 to come. But I do know that event is scheduled literally the weekend before Little Man is due. So there's a good chance that I might not be able to watch it. But honestly, was a lot of fun to watch. Space Station Gaming looked phenomenal from the start. I mean, literally Space Station Gaming dropped, I think it was 2 maps all weekend long, 1 to Optic in the grand final. And then it was like 1 other during group stages. It like literally they looked better than everybody else. I would even argue that Optic, I thought, looked better than the rest until they played Shopify Rebellion in that winner's bracket semifinal. Actually, I even went to bed early thinking that Optic was going to be able to roll Shopify in that. And instead they get upset, although Optic did get their revenge in that lower bracket final. But Space Station Gaming just proved to be way too good in the grand finals, 4-1. And there were times, man, where the green wall did not look like they were the second best team in the world, or arguably, I should say, one of the best teams in the world, just because that's how good Space Station Gaming was playing. Definitely going to be checking out more HCS events here in the future. For sure, for sure. I very much enjoyed it. Like I said, we got the next one in Salt Lake City, I do believe, here to start soft September. So we'll be doing some watch parties for that, just like we do a watch party for just about everything else, man. So busy week. Your boys got a lot going on. We got a lot of content that's going to be heading y'all's way over here on YouTube. Also, we've been trying to keep up with the shorts as well. So every time you see any video, man, really helps me out. Let that thing play through. You like it, you leave a comment. Those 3 things really kind of help push it out in front of more people. Like I said, we're past 450. We're chasing down 500, which would have us halfway to 1,000. Of course, at 500, it helps us start to monetize the channel just a little bit so we can kind of get some improvements, maybe work towards being able to hire an editor, which would then in turn just be able to pump more content, especially with, esports popping up for the scholastic and collegiate stuff. Once fall hits, y'all know that kind of affects my schedule just a little bit here, man. But I appreciate y'all tuning in. Episode 13. Hey, you know what? I didn't mention what episode number it was because I was worried about this one being cursed. We got through it. No problems. I appreciate y'all. Like I said, keep an eye out for the content coming over on YouTube. Help your boy out each and every video that you can. Also, jump down the Discord that's in that description below if you haven't already done so. If you're listening to this thing on one of the podcasts, like the audio-only platforms, Spotify, stuff like that, if you haven't left a review, help your boy out. I appreciate y'all, man. But I got to go ahead and get back to work. It's already noon on Monday. We've got a watch party here in 4 hours for North American Challengers. And I got quite a bit of editing to do, man. So until we catch y'all back over here for the next one, man, don't forget, with everything crazy going on in the world today, be true, be you, be sincere. Game hard and love hard, all right, y'all? It's your boy Q, signing out.